The Luminous Mind, episode 004.
One challenge with those of us who've decided to be this involved with our children's education is that every semester, every year, you can completely reinvent what you're doing. And so you're always wondering, well, what could I be doing better for each child, for our family as a whole? And now for me, it's for this, for my little school here.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Emily Ridley grew up near Hartford, Connecticut. She had what she considered a better-than-average middle and high school education thanks to great teachers in a small-town school setting. Her home was a place where learning was emphasized and encouraged. Learning is fascinating to her on many levels. She graduated from Brigham Young University in biology in 2002. Emily has homeschooled her 3 children since February 1st of 2008, with the support of her husband, using several different methods and programs, including public online programs through the local district. Her family has involved in homeschooling groups in Utah and Idaho over 7 years. She's taught part-time in schools, tutored in several different capacities, and taught classes for homeschool co-ops. In July of 2014, she founded a very small private school called Home Light Academy, which runs out of her home during the traditional school year. Emily's other interests include music, photography, sports, and good books. Emily,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to just kind of tell us a little about yourself? First start out with your family and then move on to hobbies and passions, what you're doing professionally with your business.
So my husband is David, and we've been married for almost 14 years. And I have a daughter and 2 sons who are in 7th, 5th, and 3rd grade now. And I don't know, I love music. I follow some sports and have played sports. I'm interested in photography and have done that semi-professionally a little bit. But probably my greatest loves are teaching and learning, and so that's kind of where I've ended up.
Awesome. And I have to say, she is an excellent photographer. We had her take pictures for our Shakespeare production, so I'm impressed with her skills with that. So take us back to your background on what your personal educational experience is, what your personal schooling experience is, maybe if you've done any higher learning or anything like that.
I went to high school in Connecticut, and it was a pretty small school. We had a lot of good teachers. So I found out later as I went on that I had kind of a unique experience as a high school student. We had really small classes, and the teachers were really engaged with us and invested. And then I went to BYU and just got a bachelor's degree in biology.
So, and then why did you choose to homeschool? You say your experience was so unique. What drove you to decide to do this? Have you homeschooled from the beginning?
Almost. Well, that kind of would have to take me back to elementary school. My elementary school experience was not that great. We were in the Seattle area, and it was probably a pretty typical elementary school for the area anyway. And I just spent a lot of time feeling bored in school.
Because she's really smart.
Well,
anyway, go ahead.
I went to school already knowing how to read, and I was really interested in learning, which I found very quickly was not popular. By the time I was probably 2nd or 3rd grade, that was pretty obvious to me that was not going to win me friends in school. And I just remember sitting and waiting a lot in elementary school. And I can think of probably 3 of my teachers in elementary school that I remember fondly that were, willing to help a few of us who wanted to learn more. But for the most part, I felt like I was just wasting my time a lot, which I don't know how many elementary school kids think that way, but I did. And my daughter, when she was 3 and a half or so, was learning how to read. And so by the time she went to kindergarten, she was reading like I was. She was reading things like Charlotte's Web. So I knew she was probably going to run into a similar situation that I did.
So did you teach her how to read? So maybe you felt a little more confident because you already taught her how to read, or
yeah, she had showed interest and had started picking up, what the names of the letters were, and wanted to know what their sounds were and how to read. And I started doing it with her. And I had two cousins that were around my age and had kids a little older than she was at the time. And they had started homeschooling, and one of them recommended that I read The Well-Trained Mind by Susan Weisbauer. And so I read that. I read a lot of it when my daughter was still, 3.5, 4 years old, and really liked the book and found myself thinking that I wished I had had an education like what was described in the book. But I also knew that, at the time I was about to have child number 3, and I didn't think that I would want to keep anybody home. I thought I would send them to school. So when Haley was old enough to go to kindergarten, I did send her, and I talked to the teacher, back to school night or whatever in August. I talked to her teacher and told her that Haley knew how to read already. Yeah. And she kind of said, "Oh, well, I think there's another boy in here who knows how to read." And I remember just thinking, no, I don't think you know what I mean by knows how to read. And
not cat.
Yeah, she wasn't just barely reading picture books. She was really reading. And by the time I went in for the first parent-teacher conference in November, the teacher kind of said, yeah, she really knows how to read. And she just didn't have the resources to challenge her. She was busy teaching 25 other kids or more how to read, and that was her most important job, and I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and they like to have everybody on the same level because it helps them do their job a lot more efficiently. Yeah. So was Haley a problem in class, or was it just that?
No, she enjoyed it to some extent. She enjoyed, making friends and doing the little activities, and the teacher would have her read to the other kids. And she would do these dot-to-dot coloring pages and bring them home, So it wasn't like she didn't enjoy it, but she wasn't getting any further academically. And I looked up, we were in the Boise area at the time, and I looked up, any groups that were, local that had anything to do with homeschooling, specifically classical education, and maybe connected with the Well-Trained Mind. And I found this group of homeschool moms that would meet in a coffee shop and just talk and give each other support, I think once a month. And so cool. I contacted one of them and went to 2 or 3 of their meetings, and they were really encouraging and supportive. They were, they had really varied backgrounds, so it was really interesting. They just kind of let me know that I could do it, that it wasn't as strange or as overwhelming or as hard as maybe I thought it might be. Yeah. And so with some recommendations for things to look for and, activities maybe that were going on in the area, I sat down with Haley. She had just turned 6. I think it was probably January, so she was halfway through kindergarten. And I told her about what I had been finding out about, that, maybe we could start homeschooling. And I talked to her about the books that I had seen and things that that we could do at home. And she just said, well, can we start that now?
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking that I would just let her finish kindergarten and try to figure things out. But I just thought,
over the summer or something.
Yeah, I just thought if she really wants to do it, then I should just do it. And her only concern was that she wanted to know if I had the phone numbers for her friends in her class at school.
Yeah.
So I told her I did. And so she just loved it. She's been a great student since then. So
an amazing student. So
her brothers have been more of a challenge, but
the Well-Trained Mind, that's kind of your educational philosophy, and that's the method that you use to teach from. Is that correct? Right?
For the most part. If I had to pick one thing that has guided me along and that I've taken a lot of information from, that's probably more than anything else has influenced what I've done. Yeah. I have, used a lot of things over the years. I don't know that I've ever run into a homeschooler who doesn't say that.
Yeah.
We sort of collect what we can find, and everything good that we ever hear, we try.
Well, and hopefully for every child, you try something different too,
Right.
because some things may work for one but not the other. So
Yeah, there's always.
So how has your paradigm or your educational philosophy kind of changed over time and with experience? I mean, you talked about feeling like you weren't qualified, I guess, in a way. I've thought a lot about that in starting this podcast, that we don't always feel qualified. We don't have that title of expert. How important do you think that is, and how has your educational philosophy changed as you've kind of went along?
Okay, well, I'll answer that in two parts. The first one is I think that I probably, whether it speaks to my general arrogance about life or not, I don't know, but I probably feel more confident educating my children than almost anybody I've talked to. I guess I'm not afraid of learning along with them if I don't know something. And I've always been fairly confident that I could teach what they needed to know. I was worried at first about being able to find curriculum to use because I didn't know where to look.
Yeah.
And I've run into that a lot. And that's definitely something that you kind of need somebody to show you what's out there. And I had that. I had people to show me, try these websites, and, there's all these other alternative things that you can do, online charter schools and all kinds of things. That kind of stuff I wasn't confident about. I didn't know where to look. I've always been pretty confident in my ability to teach and to guide my kids through the curriculum, I guess. And I haven't known everything. I mean, I've learned a lot of things along with my kids, but I guess I've just never been afraid of that.
Well, and I think that's one of the best benefits is that you do learn as a family, and I think my education, I feel like I learned more homeschooling my kids than I actually did in school. And I don't know. I mean, you're so intelligent. I can't imagine you feeling that way. But
I have learned a lot, though. I mean, there are so many things that I feel like I didn't really get to do as much as I wanted to, or that wasn't even available in school. And when you get to college, you can learn things that you're interested in, but once you choose a path, it costs a lot of money to just take classes that you're interested in. At first, you're kind of limited by whatever is taught at school, and then you're kind of limited by, whatever you have time and money for when you go on after high school. And so I feel like I have really benefited from homeschooling because I've had the time to learn things with my kids that I didn't know. Yeah. And I've loved that.
Well, in the structured classroom, I don't know if you felt, I know in your business we've talked about in the past that growing up, I always felt like you had to have desks and, you had to be sitting still and all this stuff. And you've kind of talked about that. Talk about, like, with your business, your philosophy is on that, on how to kind of come away from that structured classroom to something a little more relaxed that feels a little more welcome for them to learn. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that classroom lecture doesn't really work well until you get to at least maybe 12, 13, 14 years old. And even then, it only works if the students are interested in what they're doing. If they want to be there, then lecture can work for an older student. For younger kids, I don't know that I've ever really seen classroom lecture work really well. I've seen teachers who really have a talent for holding kids' attention. I don't claim to have that. But there are people who can do it pretty well, but by and large, for young students, it really doesn't work. I really believe that, and this is something that has become more and more pronounced as far as what I've observed and what I do compared to when I started, when my daughter was 6. I'm not really educating kids. I can provide some guidance and some opportunities. I can answer questions. I can help them plan, but they educate themselves. And I think that's
until they become a self-directed learner, you can't force somebody to learn something they're not, pursuing and wanting to do on their own, right?
Yeah, you really can't do it unless they have some say and some ability to direct themselves, and you can't really educate another person. You can facilitate it, and that has become more and more clear to me. And I also think that just from a physical standpoint, it's just not very healthy to be sitting in one position all day. And it's true of adults in the workplace too. I mean, I've seen news stories about this. People who get desks that they can raise and lower so that sometimes they can stand and sometimes they can sit. And I think I have minor back problems. And I think a lot of that comes from hauling a backpack around and being hunched over a desk for years of my life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just granted, sometimes kids kind of take advantage of this and don't get to their work when they should, or don't concentrate as much as they should. But they might start at a desk and then maybe they have reading to do. So they take their book and they go sit on a comfortable chair or on a couch, or they lay on the floor. And, you know, when they're doing their spelling test, I have a couple of boys that are just really rambunctious and they might be standing on their head while they're answering, you know. But if they're not, you know, if they're not allowed to move, it just gets worse and worse. I mean, if you go to a public school classroom in the afternoon, it's chaotic, you know, because by that time, they just really need to move around. And if you don't ever allow any of that, it just gets really hard.
Well, I'm going to kind of move from the normal questions that we had planned, but I kind of want you to explain to the audience what your business is and how you started it, and, I mean, why you're doing it, all the questions that we have.
So my business is a private school called Home Light Academy.
Do you have a website? Do you want to give out that information?
I have a Facebook page. There's not a whole lot on it. One of the moms started that. So I think if you look up Home Light Academy on Facebook, you'll find it.
You started it when?
I didn't, officially, we didn't really start until in September, so just this semester. But we had 2 days a week for a couple hours in the summer, in July and part of August, mostly so that I could sort of see how things were going to go and plan better for the fall. And I didn't have all the same students that I have now in the summer, and all the kids weren't there for every week that we did it. So it was kind of a haphazard, but it did give me some good things to use and to understand before I started in September.
Kind of shortening your learning curve a little.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping.
So how's it going, and why did you decide to do this?
Well, last summer, so this would have been summer of 2013, this idea just started coming to mind a lot, that I could start a school and have kids come and basically homeschool them. I mean, it's a little different when it's not just your family, so it doesn't really work out exactly like it would if they were all being homeschooled in their own homes. But essentially start something like a one-room schoolhouse where everyone was kind of working at their own pace on their own curriculum, and we might do a few things together here and there, but that's basically how it would be set up. So I started kind of thinking about this, and at the time I just thought, this is crazy. I don't even know anybody who wants to do this. And so I just kind of pushed it aside. And then in October, I was approached by some friends, some neighbors of mine that were just really dissatisfied with our neighborhood school here, and started asking me a lot of questions about homeschooling. And as the months went on, they kept talking to me, as well as several other families that I know and that they knew, friends of friends. And it just, I think a lot of it came about because of the changes from Common Core. There were just lots and lots of people who all of a sudden were just much more dissatisfied than they had been. And so instead of getting questions like, oh, you homeschool? That's interesting. What made you do that? You know, that's kind of how it had been a lot of times. Or they would say, oh, that's great. I could never do that. You know, that's usually the kind of response I got. And instead of that, I was getting more of they were really interested in what I was doing. They really wanted to know how and why.
Lots of questions.
Because they might want to do it too, because they were just really frustrated with what their kids were dealing with at school, and the lack of response from teachers and administrators who also felt like they didn't have any power to do anything differently. And it just kind of evolved into
snowballed.
Yeah, and we went back and forth, and starting in September, the family that started talking to me in October, I have 3 of their kids that come, and then another family that lives a little bit further away, they send 2 of their kids here. And then my 3. So I have 8 total, ranging in age from 1st grade to 7th grade. And they all do their own curriculum for the most part. I do some grammar lessons with 2 or 3 kids at a time. And sometimes we'll do science together, and I have them all studying United States geography right now, so sometimes they'll study that together. But other than that, everything is individualized. And so
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so they just come and they take out all their books and they find a chair and start working. I print out a sheet that has all of their work assignments for the week. And so for each day, they just keep working on things and check off what they've done. And they'll have, I come over and answer questions, so that's kind of how it works.
It's turning into more of a study hall, and then you go around and help each individual child. And is that kind of how you're working?
For the most part, although to me, study hall just brings back memories of
detention.
Yeah, throwing paper airplanes and stuff like that. But
hopefully there's a little more study, less paper airplanes. But
and, cool. Some days are more chaotic than others. The kids don't always want to sit down and get their work done. Sometimes they're talking about something else for a while, and I've got to go redirect them a little bit. But for the most part, they get their work done. And despite the crazy days, I had a meeting with the two sets of parents a few weeks ago and kind of went into it a little bit worried because sometimes things, didn't go very smoothly, but just found that they were all very happy with it so far. So I try to remind myself of that and keep going.
So what are some of the biggest obstacles that you face personally and then also maybe in your business, and what are you learning from those?
I don't know. Obstacles for me are probably more internal than anything else. The thing that I struggle with the most probably is feeling like I'm putting in all of this effort, and not only do the kids not always do what we plan on doing, but they don't seem to care sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Sometimes it's a pretty thankless job. I mean, I think if you talk to any teacher and most parents.
Yeah.
And so I've got the combination of those, parents, and I guess all homeschoolers deal with that. But I guess just feeling like, I wonder if this is even going to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and of course I always wonder, well, is there something I could have done or that they could have done that would have been better than this? And you just never know that, there's no control group.
Yeah.
You can't go back a year and have the kids do something completely different and then just see if they turn out differently. I mean, you can't do that. You have to just keep making the decisions as you go. And I think that's one challenge with those of us who've decided to be this involved with our children's education, is that every semester, every year, you can completely reinvent what you're doing. And so you're always wondering, well, what could I be doing better for each child, for our family as a whole? And now for me, it's for this, for my little school here.
This is a great time to take a break.
If you would like to see your business grow, then contact us at The Luminous Mind for advertising space on theluminousmind.net or on the podcast, The Luminous Mind Podcast.
Welcome back to The Luminous Mind. What are some successes that you've seen then? I mean, I guess that's kind of hard to ask right now where they're so young, but I'm sure especially with Haley and some of your older kids, there's things that maybe you're pleased with that they're learning. And
I count success when I see kids master something and feel good about it. That's really fun to see, and to see their interest. And a lot of times I kind of just plant things out for them to look at maybe when they're waiting for me to come around, because the things that that I feel like need to be required of kids are not always fun. And that's always the case. I mean, everybody has things to do that need to be done because either you need to just maintain, whether it's cleaning your house or whatever, or it's just a skill that you just can't learn quickly. You have to do it over and over and over before you get good at it. There are just those things, I think, that have to be part of your education. And so those are the ones where that's what's on their list and they've got to do it and check it off so they can, get a little better at handwriting and spelling and their math facts and all the math concepts they need. And I want them to learn something about history through the ages and science and everything. But then I put things out on the shelf that I find them all huddled around a certain book. And that's what's really fun to see for me a lot of times. They find something that's, that's so cool, and they're showing each other and they're talking about it. And if I can encourage some of that so that they can see that they're, that learning is really fun and can be really motivating and satisfying to learn and get good at something and master a skill and master a body of knowledge. That's what I count as success. And I've seen some of that. And I've also seen some of them get a lot better at managing their own time and figuring out how to, okay, I have to get this done. Well, I've got to get started. And they can get all the way to the end and then come back to me and say, I had a question on this one and this one. I mean, how many employers would really love that?
Yeah.
If they had people who could see what needs to be done, and just be able to get through everything. I mean, that's kind of a life skill that I think is easier to learn in this environment than it is in public school or some other things. So that's been fun. And one of the first graders I have did not have a very good kindergarten year last year. And her parents were pretty worried about it. Her self-esteem was terrible. And she came to me just saying, oh, I can't read. I'll never be able to do this. I can't do it. And within a couple of weeks, her attitude had totally changed. I mean, I showed her, you already know these sounds and you can do it. She can read. You know, I mean, she has a ways to go, but she can read and she knows she can, and she feels much better about herself and what she can do. And that's been really gratifying to see.
So what are some personal habits that you've acquired that add to that success?
I think the biggest thing is just being able to be consistent, which sometimes is really hard. I think just my personality makes that easier for me than it does for other people I've known that have homeschooled. And having other people come to my house that aren't my kids,
that's really keeps you accountable.
It makes me really, I've got to be ready when they're here. And I spend probably like 3 hours or so every Friday afternoon getting everyone's school chart ready for the next week. So they're planned out, everything that they need to do. But that's really it. To me, it's a matter of trying to be consistent. Every day we have school. Doesn't always go well. But, and that's kind of the same. It's the same thing with a lot of things in life. Every day I try to do the dishes. I don't always do it. Every day you try again. And that, and especially if that's what I want my kids to be able to do.
So what are some benefit that you have enjoyed most?
Well, learning along with them is a big one for me. And I think another thing, too, that I've really appreciated with homeschooling is the social aspect of it, which a lot of people say.
I didn't ask you our socialization question.
But it's just funny because that's another thing that's not really very natural about public school. I mean, that's the only time you're ever going to be with kids that are just born the same year you were. It's like, So I think my kids and other kids I've known that homeschool, the co-op that we are a part of, the kids are just so much more willing to talk to people of different ages. I mean, I've had my kids get in the car after we've been in an activity and tell me that the teenagers let them play, whatever they were doing, tag football or ultimate frisbee or something, and there'll be a group of teenagers out there, and the little kids,
and they're not harassing them, they're treating them.
Yeah, they'll just let the little kids play along with them. And I just haven't seen as many cliques. And I think sometimes when we think that school, it helps everybody learn their social skills for their life, but in a lot of ways I think it
was wrong.
So you're learning the wrong things. And they've had more interactions with adults in different situations and have had practice, just talking to people of different ages. We've had more flexibility with our time. Even now, and I have the school every day, but we're done by 11:30.
So, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
To think that you can get so much in just in the few hours that you have them. And even in your school, I think that's amazing that you're still able to do that.
Yeah, it really, if the kids are all engaged and they know it has to be done, and it's just so much more efficient to have them working at their own pace. And so they just get done. They don't have to get in line for anything. They don't have to. So, So you don't have to send any of them home with homework for their parents to do with them, or do you just kind of pick it up the next day and? Yeah, they'll take something home just to show their parents or something they've decided they want to work on at home. But no, for the most part, usually they get done what's on their chart for the day. If they don't, it gets moved to tomorrow, and it just keep adapting. Some math lessons take a couple days, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And some of them are really quick. And
you gauge it towards the child.
Right.
Not for the masses, but for the individual child. So what would be some advice or encouragement you would give somebody just starting out? I think you're awesome for helping families that maybe didn't feel confident in doing that, but if you ever approached somebody who was just starting out and wanted to homeschool, what would you tell them? What encouragement would you give them?
Probably what I heard from a couple of seasoned homeschool moms when I started, and that was just to relax.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard to do that, but if you can just kind of take a step back, and I have to do this on a regular basis still, take a step back and think about how far they've come and how far I've come in what we've learned, and that there's still time. There's always time to keep learning, and it doesn't happen all at once. And that parents, I really believe parents are the experts on their own children.
Yes,
and
they are.
You know, you'll need some help with things. I mean, if your child breaks their leg and you're not a doctor, then certainly I would recommend you take them to somebody. But as far as, you know, what they need the most and what they can learn and what they can do, usually the parents are the best authorities on that.
Exactly. And then they can get, like you said, get help places that they may not feel the most qualified.
Yeah, but somebody who's dealing with 30 kids at once doesn't have that. I mean, and I only have 5 other kids besides mine. But I still, you know, at the beginning of the semester, the parents are the ones sitting here with me picking the curriculum.
I think that's amazing.
And
that's awesome.
That's what I think needs to happen. You know, they know better whether they should expect their 10-year-old to do such and such by the end of the semester. They know that better than I do. You know, and if I get some insight about what they're doing or what they're not doing, then I should talk to the parent about it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Was that pretty eye-opening for some of them? I mean, where they've gone through public school to be able to do that, was that exciting or was that like scary for them?
I think it was both. It's still scary for me, and I've been doing it for several years, but I think all the parents knew that they needed more control over what their kids were doing because the results they were seeing were not very encouraging. They know their kids better than the school system does.
Yeah.
And so,
well, in a lot of ways, I'm grateful that there is Common Core because I think a lot of people are starting to go, wow, what's going on? And they're starting to actually, instead of just putting them on the school bus and waving goodbye, they're going in and seeing, and then, you know, that raises a lot of questions. And so I think it's good. I mean, I'd love to see more people picking out their children's curriculum. That is amazing.
Yeah, I sure hope that more and more parents question what's happening.
So do you have a favorite book? I mean, we talked about your curriculum.
It's called The Well-Trained Mind.
Yes. But are there other books or resources that you might think are useful for parents? I
have used a lot of things that Susan Weisbauer recommends, some of which, I mean, I've used Saxon Math for the most part, for instance. As far as philosophy goes, I did read Thomas Jefferson Education several years ago. And while I don't agree with everything that has become over the years, reading that book did help me to sort of shift my priorities a little bit for the better, I think. Kind of opened me up to some different ideas. And like I said, there are a lot of things in that in even the book itself and in the culture that's come out of it that I don't really agree with. But I am really glad that I read that when I did. I think the general philosophy is good. That's been a good thing. I've also used, like E.D. Hirsch has his, you know, what your first grader needs to know, etc. And then he has like the cultural literacy dictionaries, and which is kind of good to have some kind of a basis like that, you know, if you're worried about, oh, we haven't covered something.
Yeah.
If you have some kind of a reference type book like that. And I mean, I've also read a little bit of John Holt. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot out there. And I've basically just kind of taken pieces of everything, pieces that I like of everything that I've read, and mull it over, use it if I can.
So we kind of talked about hoping more parents would choose to take control of their kids' education. What are some changes that you'd like to see in the future?
Yeah, that's kind of a big question. Well, I think the thing that worries me the most is, as far as what might happen in the future, is that there won't be enough parents who object happening in the public schools. What happens in the public schools really has a huge effect on our nation. And so if too many parents just don't take the time and the interest and the effort to step up and say, I don't like this and it needs to change, then things are just going to get worse. We won't have as many well-educated people by far. Now there seems to be stress on, getting more kids educated in science and math, because there's all these tech companies, in our technology companies and energy companies and, engineering companies and stuff, and they cannot find people.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, and I also think that the other thing that worries me the most that's happening now is the idea that the schools and the teachers are telling kids that their parents are wrong, that their parents don't know what they're doing, that they need to depend on the school. And that's just going to be horribly debilitating to our country, to our society. And that worries me. And so I really just hope that more and more people will step up and say something and decide to do something different. Kids need a lot of help, but they need to be able to have some say, have opportunity to discover what they want to learn. And there needs to be more of the one-room schoolhouse model did really great things for our country for a long time.
Yeah, and where they learn and then they mentor others too.
Yeah, another thing that happens here is I have, the older girls, I will say, go help so-and-so with their reading lesson. And I think that's an important part of it. You learn and then you help others. And so by the time you get to be an adult, you not only can learn and you know the material and have the skills, but you also know how to help someone else along.
Yeah, which reinforces their learning on top of that. So that's amazing. Awesome. So is there any parting words of advice or maybe a favorite quote that you'd like to share?
My advice is, if you have kids in public school, get involved and say something if you don't agree. And then if you're going to take your kids out and do something different, then relax and, give yourself the time and the space to help it happen.
And that they can do it, definitely.
Yeah, that they can do it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
We need more fire starters. To join us, go to our website, theluminousmind.net, and click on the Fire tab. You'll be able to schedule an appointment today. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help us light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.